Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our Elmore Ltd investor briefing webinar. My name is Nicola Gazzatti and I'm co-founder of Investor Relations Consultancy Corporate Storytime. I'm delighted to have Elmore's Limited's Managing Director and CEO, Mr. David Mendelawitz, with me today to run through an investor presentation, which will be followed by a brief Q&A session. If you would like to submit a question during the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Elmore provides the equipment and expertise that mining companies need to deliver sellable products and also owns and operates Pico magnetite mine in the Northern Territory. Elmore has recently announced that the first shipment of Pico magnetite is currently being loaded for export in the Port of Darwin. So without any further ado, I'm pleased to hand over to David, who will present a comprehensive Elmore update. David, over to you.
Thanks for that. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm winging this a little bit, as you might be able to see. I'm down the port. We're just unloading another train. I was just there to tidy up loose ends as this ship is going off. I'm just going to share my screen and bring up the presentation. Bear with me here, and I will get us going. So for those who don't know, Elmore, our main focus here is contract minerals processing, but we're a relatively new startup. I mean, the listed entity's been around for a while, but in terms of focusing on what we're doing, it's really been only the last year and a bit that we've been kind of into it. Our base model really is about stranded resources, gold, copper, all sorts of other things there, and we've got some proprietary foundations that allow us to take very large mobile equipment to sites, so we can get into projects that would otherwise be, too tough for someone to build because they need bigger infrastructure, but for smaller mine lives. But in the meantime, as we're ramping up, and we do have equipment to do that, just a brief thing on the board here, lots of experience across the board. We have been here, done that before. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years now. It says 25 now, but it's getting a bit on. But our main focus is the Pico project as we started. So Pico is around about 1,000 km south of Darwin, where I'm currently sitting port. And the initial start of Pico is the processing of an old stockpile. The stockpile, I'll just flick and show you in the background here. This is our plant in front of the stockpile. Stockpile is about 520 metres off in the distance there and about 420 metres wide. The low point where you're looking is about 9 metres high and the high point is about 12 metres high. So all up there's about 3.75 million tonnes of material that has been stockpiled from mining operations, both here at the Pico mine and right next door at some of the other gold mines over time. So Pico started in the 30s and finished in the 70s. So this stockpile has been sitting there for about 50 years now. Well, it was completed, being built about 50 years ago. But within that stockpile, there's around about 2.5 million tonnes of magnetite, about 130,000 ounces of gold, just under 10,000 tonne of copper, 4,000 tonne of cobalt, and 2,000 tonne of bismuth. So what we're doing, and using this plant that you can see here, and this is a bit of an older photo from earlier in the year, is we've started on our first stage. So our first stage is actually extracting magnetite from the project. So we were first boots on the ground there almost exactly a year ago now. We've built a plant to extract this magnetite. The target is 350,000 tonne per annum. And that's mainly limited by the logistics, getting it up to Darwin. So that'll give us about a 7-year mine life. But as you can see in the background, well, we saw before in the background there, that we're bringing up material on the train in half-height sea containers, and then they unload those containers into the mineral shed, which is on the other side of me right now, and then that goes onto the ship loader. So the first stage there, we basically just dig up the material, put it through the plant. It goes from a dry stockpile into a wet product. And when we put that in, around about 37% of the cobalt and 50% of the copper is actually going into the water. So we've purchased some plant that we're in the process of pulling down and moving over to Pico. And that plant will be used to actually extract the water-soluble copper and cobalt. Our aim is to have that out by the end of Q1 next year, selling that by the beginning of Q2 next year. And then after that, we've got various other points. So when we do that, we'll recover about 25% of the contained gold. Around about 25% of the gold will also be lost to the magnetite. We could probably recover more, but we don't think it's economically viable. Then the next stage after that will be to recover the non-water soluble copper and cobalt. To do that, there's a number of options we have, but we think the most likely is we'll install a small autoclave there to oxidize that material. And then the fourth stage, which may actually go at the same time as or before it, is to actually recover the rest of that gold. So I'm flicking around there with the CIL. So about half the gold will need a CIL to recover it. There's a couple of options. Our neighbours are building one at the moment, or we could put in a small one. Beyond this, there's lots of resources still in the ground in Pico, but really for us, that's another day, because although they were defined by mining, they haven't been defined to JORC standard. And so we're not in a rush. We've got plenty of material to put in there. So just a brief on the magnetite there, as I said, about 350,000 tonnes per annum. We believe we'll be at that rate by Q1 next year, or the end of this quarter now. From a production standpoint, we think we'll be there by the end of this quarter comfortably. From a logistics standpoint, it'll be by the end of this quarter or early on the beginning of next quarter. We've been making around about 65% iron as a concentrate. We have that sold out to a Hong Kong off-taker that we've got a good relationship with. So the logistics are all in place. Post the actual production of magnetite, of cobalt, when we'll be able to amortize other metals across the actual production, will be around about $70 a tonne as the break even. So we're well and truly above that at the moment. As I said, copper and cobalt, we expect to bring that in early next year. And then gold, at the moment we don't actually have a forecast for the completion of it, but for the flotation, which will take a quarter of it, will be expect Q1 next year. It's just a bit of an overview of the remnants in there. Beyond that, we've got another project that we're working on, albeit slower than Pico. In these times, we've been particularly transforming from being the operator to the owner of Pico. We've been stretched in terms of finances to do this, but the project over in Queensland, which is our next one, which is really more fitting to what we set out to do as a standard model there, is about an hour out of Cairns. They've got around about 250,000 ounces that we're looking to process. We've got an earn-in deal there where we'll manage everything, and we will earn 50% of it by putting the plant there and putting the development costs into the project. So, and we've got plenty of other projects that we're looking at the moment with people coming to us. So it's just a quick flick, I think maybe out of order with regard to the Hodgson's project relative to Pico. I think Pico in today's time is worth noting because really it is turning out to be a bit of a market darling in terms of ESG up here. We are processing an old tail, so it is a rehabilitation project. We are using a local workforce. Currently, we're about 80%. We're actually increasing that number as a percentage. We've got about 30% Indigenous there. We're working on making, battery metals in terms of copper and cobalt, magnetite as well, and truly the lowest kind of carbon source of steel production there. And in the background, whether it's achievable or not, we're working with the government and other stakeholders to see whether we can put this on a sustainable power solution. We believe we can, and so does everybody else, but it's early days. So it's not something we've been able to finalise quite yet, but that's something to watch. So that's a bit of an overview of us. If there's any questions, I suppose just to complete it, we're loading our first ship at the moment. Most of it's on board. The ship's sailing later today. This is really a big learning experience for us and for everybody else. This is the first magnetite to be shipped out of Darwin that we or anybody up here have been involved in or aware of. The port aren't aware of any other product like this going out. So it's been a reasonably steep learning curve for rail and the stevedores and the port guys here and for us and so on. So while we're ramping up everything in the port end, at the mine end here, we've also had to ramp up everything there. And this ship will be a smaller ship than we would normally aim to do. But part of that is because we want to learn how to do it effectively, learn what we should do next time, and learn what the real numbers and the real times are going to be. In this kind of sense, there's no ability to stop and study it. You really need to dive in and get it done to see how it's going to work. So compared to other startups that I've been involved in terms of bulk materials or others, I think it's been truly in line, or I might in many aspects even better than some of the other ones. Some of the metrics we've hit, obviously it's a smaller project, but relative to our startup in say Fortescue, where we're well funded, we had the same challenges in Fortescue, and I think from a percentage wise of targets, we've actually been ahead of it. But as I've described to someone else in the recent days here, the pretty thing of putting a ship out is all nice and simple, but behind the scenes there's millions of punch points. There's lots of people there's lots of moving parts to align it to a ship that's sitting statically 200 metres from me now, that's now nice and low in the water compared to when it came in with a belly full of magnetite going out tonight. So if there's any questions, I can quickly answer them before I sweat myself to death in this car.
Thank you so much, David, for that update. That was fantastic. So we'll move on to Q&A, and we do have a few questions for you. How long is the port storage contract for, and is there any chance of it being pulled away from Elmore?
It's a 5-year contract. The moment we're covering everything we need to do to not breach any of the leases there. At the moment, I don't see anything that takes that away from us. It's a solid lease contract like any other lease contract there. We've got our rights. I know others have tried to take it away because there's only one port storage shed up here, but unfortunately for them, that didn't work out. So we stuck in there under the radar and grabbed the shed. And it makes all the difference to us because we really want to have this material out of the rain when we're up here in Darwin, because magnetite is so dense and this material is very fine. It's like fine sand, but it's twice the weight of granite. And so if we have it soaking wet, it becomes a very heavy slurry in the ship, which is something we want to avoid. Hence the reason we bring it up in sealed half-height containers here to tip it out. So it's an asset that a massive asset to the company, and at the moment we're comfortable that it's secured.
Thanks so much, David. So our next question is the loan being refinanced with a lower interest rate? And if so, when?
Look, absolutely. That's certainly the objective. When we look at the loan terms that we took on, it wasn't to live off that loan as the source of funding the purchase. It was to encourage us to move on, and because this was basically a time where the vendor wanted to sell, and we couldn't fund that immediately, so we locked it down with a loan so that we actually secured ownership with it and gave us enough time to refinance it. So if I'd gone too low in the interest, I'm pretty sure that laziness would have kicked in and I would have taken longer. So this encouraged. We've had recently we've negotiated some changes in that where we haven't as of yet executed any change.
Well, it looks like David might have dropped out. So we might end the webinar there. If you do have any further questions for David, please feel free to email them to us at info@corporatestorytime.com. Thank you so much for your time today. And we'll get a recording of this out on Elmore and Corporate Storytime social media accounts in the coming days. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks, David.